I'm looking forward to that. Ray, thanks very much.
Yeah. Well, Wally said that he had been reading some books on leadership, and which he really didn't need to. He's a good leader. Which we are a group of leaders, we all are. But he said, I think it would be interesting to hear what you've got to tell us about some leadership examples in the B52. And so I'll work around that. I'm sure you've all seen the B52, Big Ugly, as we called it.
They're smaller than I thought.
Yeah, it's a little smaller. It's hard to get in, you know. It's a little bit cramped. In fact, the B52, believe it or not, is very cramped. The crew sits right there, and you get in, and to get from the entry, the hatch, and you climb up a ladder. The second story is right here. Climb up a ladder, and to get to the pilot's compartment, it's this, and then crawl into the compartment. So it's all built. See what they did? They built a bomb bay to carry all the bombs, and they thought, man, we need gas to get to the destination. So they put the wing, we need motors to push this thing. And then someone said, oh shit, we forgot the crew. And so we got what was left. So in a way it feels funny to, like I said, talk about leadership, but I have taught some classes on leadership through my military career. And a couple things about leadership that I'll add, and I'll try to make it as close to the B52, but I'll speak on leadership. So one thing about leadership, three things. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. And that's a very good one no matter what kind of organization you're in, is to lead, follow, or get out of the way. And I have tried, I've got a three-step thing that I have used for raising the boys in the family, for leading in the military, for flying airplanes, or for running a business. As aggressive as necessary, as gentle, smooth, or nice as possible, but the bottom line is whatever it takes. And when you put those in order, whether it's, like I said, raising boys, because sometimes you got to go right to the end, is as aggressive as necessary. But you want to be as nice as possible. In flying, you need to be as aggressive as necessary. Steve and I have talked about that occasionally on flying. As aggressive as necessary, as smooth as possible. Most people get those mixed up, and they get too smooth, and they're not aggressive enough to stay on. And then the bottom line, of course, is whatever it takes. And then there's 4 attributes that gives leaders power. You can read a dozen books or 24 books, whatever, on leadership, and there's various schools of leadership and on and on. But it really gets down to 4 attributes that gives leaders power. Your position, if you're the boss, if you're the commander, if you're the head of the household, maybe. Anyway, but your position gives you power as a leader. 2, the ability to punish and reward gives you power as a leader. Expertise in the field gives you gives the leaders power. And charisma gives you power. Now you can work on a lot of these. Charisma is the hard one to earn or gain or whatever, but the more charisma you have, the better off. So let's take a typical squadron of B-52s. Obviously the squadron commander has got power because he or she is the squadron commander. The ability to punish and reward might go to the first sergeant. You know, even though it's a sergeant in a squadron of mainly officers, you still got to respect the first sergeant because he or she's got power. The expertise in the field, it might be a lieutenant in an entire squadron that knows the systems inside out, knows the regs inside out, and knows the FARs, all this, and that lieutenant has got power because he is an expertise in the field. And then there's that certain individual in the squadron that when they walk into the room, the place just lightens up, you know, and we've all worked with whoever that might be. It may not be the squadron commander. It might be another lieutenant. It might be anybody. But that person has power as a leader because they've got charisma. So I'm going to bring some of those into the flying the bomber. I started out in my career as a T-38 instructor. And in that position, you've got leadership because you're the instructor and you've got a lieutenant in the other seat and you're the boss. Hopefully you've got expertise in the field of knowing how to fly the airplane. And to charisma, well, that's up to you and the student whether you have that or not. I've flown with some screamers, yellers, whatever you want to call them, and I didn't like their charisma at all. When I was a student pilot, I was flying, and I'll never forget him, Major Dentino. So I'm a second lieutenant in the front seat of the jet, Major Dentino's in the back, and we're flying formation, and he says, "Problem with you, Beverly, you don't sing enough." Sing, sir, I'm trying to fly formation. Sing to me. I can't sing to me, Lieutenant. I just started to hum and all that. All he was trying to do was get me to relax. You know, so got a death grip with a stick to the throttle, and it was just not flying good formation. Got me to relax with the kind of charisma that Major Dentino had. It worked. Okay. So anyway, in the T-38, it's very obvious who's in charge. The instructor pilot. Well, after my assignment in the T-38s, I got assigned to the B52. And they're about as far apart in airplanes as you can get, a T-38 to a B52. There's more gas in that little bitty tip tank than the T-38 held. Give you a good example. Big difference. Another big difference is this: we would often call it the navigator's airplane. And they didn't fly it, but they kind of ran the mission. The navigators did the timing, they did the bombing, the planning for the route, the trip, and all that stuff. So for the first time in my career, I'm now working with non-pilots. And when I went through training, we went through as an integral crew. The same student crew that we went through, we were going to go to Fairchild as an integral crew. Well, that had its real disadvantage, and the disadvantages, and I'll share that, how I worked it when I became a bomber instructor pilot there. The crew, the navigator, the radar, the electronic warfare officer, even the gunner, the listed guy, got to see the struggles of the new pilot. I couldn't fly it, you know. My idea of crew coordination was, if all you people get off the interphone, I can fly this jet, you know. But you got to work. There's 10 people on the same interphone, 6 crew members and 4 instructors. And so crew coordination is critical to know who's talking to who and what you want to get done. I had no concept of that kind of crew coordination. So that was a major step. Another, us pilots like to fly. You know who gets to look out the window in a B-52? The pilot and the co-pilot. Everybody else is buried inside the crew compartment, and they can't even see outside. The EW and the gunner flew backwards the whole time. You know, they're facing the back part of the airplane. The radar and the nav are downstairs in this hole. And so not all crew members in the B-52 enjoyed the mission, you know, because pilots were upstairs looking outside, having a good time flying the airplane, but the navigators were always telling me where to go. In every way you can think of that, they're telling me where to go. So you've got the aircraft commander, the pilot, that's in charge, and I didn't even know what was going on. That's a very tough hill to climb when you're in that situation. So the leadership, I had no expertise in the field, because I'm brand new flying the airplane, and I was used to a high performance T-38, and now I'm flying this thing that I actually started working out with weights to get to fly it, because it was so awkward to fly one-handed air refueling. So I'm working out with weights when I'm not flying the airplane to have enough strength to fly this only thing. So I have no expertise in the field. You don't really have any ability to punish and reward, because we were all students. Charisma, I'm not sure I had charisma, because I was always, or not always, but quite often angry in the airplane because it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So the only thing I had was that I was the student aircraft commander. It's not very much leadership ability as just being the student aircraft commander. Obviously made it through, went up to Fairchild, we're an integral crew, and now I've got to earn all these others. I've got to earn the charisma, or become somehow a charismatic aircraft commander. I've got to gain expertise in the field. So I studied, and learned as much of that about it as I could. When we had idle times of flying, like just going from point A to B, code, you got the controls, I'm going downstairs. I went down between the navs. All right, what are you guys doing with all of this stuff? You know, I had no idea. I mean, it's just magic down there. Went to the EW, the electronic warfare, and he's got scopes that he jams radars and stuff like that. And I tried to learn it so that I could have that a little bit more expertise in the field. Okay? since I was the aircraft and air crew commander, it does gives you a little bit of ability to punish and reward, but it didn't go very far because we're all in this together. You know, we're an air crew. However, I substituted as an aircraft commander on another crew. The pilot was sick, and so scheduling says, all right, Beverly, you be the aircraft commander for this flight. I knew them, knew their names and all this stuff, but we'd never flown together. And so I'm the stranger among us all. And a couple of things that go on in the bomber. When someone wants to go take a relief, you're supposed to check off with the boss, with the aircraft commander. Pilot, now I'd like to check off for relief. Sure, report back on. You know, this is what would happen. Well, he checked off, and a little bit later, the radar wanted to check off for relief. I said, wait a minute, what's going on down there? Where's the nav? Oh, he's back in the seat. Oh, well, you never did check on with me. Okay. Oh, well, he's back in the seat. All right, radar, we'll play ahead and check off for relief. No. They had never heard that, even though that's required in the crew coordination portion. So then, it turns out we're going to go low level, and the weather wasn't really good. We'd had some equipment problems throughout the flight and so forth. So I said, all right, crew, listen up. We're going to take a little bit of crew decision here on what's going on. So in the bomber, there's a crew report order that we always go through the crew in that order. Nav is first. So I said, Nav, what's your equipment status? How do you feel about low level? Most everything's working, and I think the weather's bad. All right, very good. The guns, what do you think? The gunner's the enlisted guy with 5 other officers. And the gunner says, pilot, you're asking for my opinion? I said, you're part of this crew, aren't you? I'll defer to you, sir. All right, very well. E-Dub, what do you think? The equipment's good, and I'm good for going low level. And the radar asked him, the co-pilot said, all right, the consensus and so forth, the final decision is we're going low level. Let's go. You know, and so the timing. Then we're heading into low level, or towards the start descent point. And I've always, in the T-38, we were doing the fix-to-fix, and I could, on my TAC-N and DME. Now it looks to me like we're going to be a little late entering low level. The nav says, what's the winds, pilot? I said, I don't have a wind indicator. Thank you, pilot. I'll do the navigating. That didn't set well with me, but all right, it's not my crew and so forth, so we'll go with that. And so then we fly low, everything worked. We're on the way back to the home drone, and most of the time in navigation, we would use the bombing system to navigate with. The radar navigator would put the bomb site out there and would bomb the next turn point type of thing. And the pilots get what's called an FCI, a flight command indicator. And the nav would just say, pilot, center the FCI. Center the FCI would go to the next turn point. Kind of like a GPS with the navs doing it. And so they said, pilot, we'll get the FCI on the fix shortly. I said, that's all right, I'll just do a fix-to-fix. The navigator says, I'll bet you can't do one, pilot. Well, now he's challenged my ego. You know? Of course I can do one. So I started doing it. And I will say, luckily for me, when we started doing it, the sun was over here. And after trying to do this fix-to-fix, I noticed the sun is over here. So I finally, hey, you know, Nav, if you'd stop screwing with the heading system, I could make this fix-to-fix work. And he said, how'd you know that? I said, I knew that. I didn't tell him because I saw the sun. But I knew that. Well, the flight went okay. The next senior person on the crew is generally the radar navigator. You know, the captain's or the pilot's senior to the co-pilot, the radar senior to the navigator. At the end of the flight, you know, he came up to me personally and he said, Ray, I will fly with you any day, anytime. That was an awesome flight. That was enough right there to know, even if for a fraction I earned a little bit of charisma, a little bit of leadership throughout with that sub crew. It worked well. When I got to be an instructor pilot down at Castle teaching these, I had an aircraft commander that was coming in just like I was. Flew, it turned out T-37s, but still was a UPT instructor. And so I took him privately, part of, you know, separate from the rest of the crew, and I said, I was where you are now, and we're going to work together, and I'm going to try to teach you some artificial credibility, all right, on what's happening. So at the end of each flight, you know, I would take him aside before the formal crew critique on what happened. He said, all right, I want you to compliment the navigator on this one thing. He did a fine job there. Okay? I want you to ask the EW what, and I give him something I'd wanted him to ask for. And that's all I'd tell him on that one day. So the crew critique, what we normally start with, is the instructor pilot would begin with, again, in a leadership position. All right, any students, do you have any comments? Most all the students, they didn't know what was going on with their first or second flight in the bomber. The aircraft commander said, yeah, by the way, what you did here, that was really good. I appreciate that. And then he asked the EW the question. Next flight, he was anxious with his notepad. All right, what do I do next? You know, and we did this for about 4 flights in a row. So, and I built his artificial credibility of working with the crew. And then the next flight, he said, okay, what do you have for me? And what do you have? Oh, what do you mean? What do I have for you? What do you have for me that you're going to talk to your crew about? We always have to make that next step. Okay? So the leadership in there is there. Now we're going to move. I've got something on my list. We're going to move to 2 assignments later. I was at T-30 or the bomber crew at Fairchild, just a line crew member, made instructor. Went down to Castle, was a CCTS instructor. Went to a staff job, and now I'm back at Castle again as a CCTS instructor. At this time, though, I'm a major as a lieutenant colonel selectee. A pretty nice position to be in. But it starts out, didn't really have a job for me. I just, asked to go back to Castle. And so the deputy commander for operations said, Ray, we need you to modernize the CCTS. He knew I had background in education and a lot of instructor time. So that was my marching orders. Modernize the combat crew training school. Oh, yes, sir. I'll get right on that. And so as I began to climb this mountain, I found out I'm going to have to ask a lot of agencies for information and for them to do things, give me input to make these changes and so forth. And in the military, the fewer letters you have for your office, the higher you are. The wing commander is CC. The vice wing commander is CV. The deputy commander for operations is DO. And then under the DO, the operational command, there's DOC, DOT, for training, and so the more letters you have, the farther down in the pile you are. And you can never task up. A 4-letter cannot task a 3-letter what they're going to do. A 2 or 3-letter can't task a 2-letter, and so forth. So I went into Colonel Ratliff and I said, Colonel, I have a situation that I need to be a 3-letter. And he says, oh, we can't do that. Very well, sir. Then this is what's going to probably have to happen. Since I'm going to have to task these other people to give me information, you will have to sign every letter that I write. He says, what letter do you want? And so as a major, I became a 3-letter, a DOM, equivalent to the bomb squadron commander, the tanker squadron commander, and I took a lot of static. But it put me into that position. Okay? I gained a little bit of power there. I had an upward scale because I didn't know what how to work with civilian agencies, with SIMCOM, flight safety, to give inputs to modernize the CTS. But I finally learned how to do that, and it worked very well. Finally pinned on the silver oak leaves, became a lieutenant colonel, and it's still, they didn't know quite what to do with me, and I kind of finished the job and passed it on to the civilian training group. So now I'm without a job, the lieutenant colonel on base. And so I'm back in the squadron doing the very same thing I did as a captain, and that is running a line instructor crew as a lieutenant colonel. Well, my other instructors, captains, they were first quite a little intimidated to have a lieutenant colonel be their aircraft commander. Said, we have a job to do. We're all in this team together. Let's get it done. Now, we mentioned something else. My older son is a retired Army Sergeant First Class. So he's had some leadership and all, and he and I talk about the different ways of leadership. And one of the things that he would use with his people quite often is the game we've all played at some point of paper, rock, and scissors. Only for him it was paper, rock, and rank. So when his people began to, all right, I'll play a little paper, rock, and rank. I win. And which we found out was similar to what I would do. The crew started to get a little, not really out of hand, but not paying attention quite as much. I said, I tell you what, because they wanted to go one way, I was going the other. I'll flip you for it. I go, flip you for it? Yeah, watch. I win. And so again, I had that position that gave that. However, a couple examples of not good leadership in the B52, and I want to talk about that. I was in the wing headquarters at one point, and now I'd moved on to a very, very good position, my retirement position. I was the operations officer of the largest training squadron in SAC, which was really kind of good. It was a joint bomber tanker squadron, and we had the squadron commander and me as the colonel and everybody else. Great job for my last job in the Air Force. But I'm in wing headquarters at the time in a new DO. Oh, wait, let's back it up. First, he was the new DO on base, a colonel, needed to go through requal, and I was selected to be his instructor during this time. So we're ride one together. I had another crew, and it was his turn into the seat to air refuel. So I'm in the right seat, he's in the seat to refuel. And as we start to close on the tanker, I very cautiously and comfortably slid my hand up behind the throttles. I am the instructor pilot. He goes, I don't want your hand there, it makes me nervous. Sorry it makes you nervous, sir, but I'm the instructor pilot. I'm going to guard the throttles. I put my hand back up. He starts getting it at one point a little bit too close to the tanker, so I put my hand in front of the throttles so he can't push them forward anymore. He said, I told you that makes me nervous. Well, sir, if you push them any farther forward, we're going to hit the tanker. So I was holding the throttles back at this point. And so it kind of set the stage. So we get into the traffic pattern. Working, it was finally his turn in the seat. I'm in the right seat, and he coming in for the first approach, and I put my hand up behind the throttles again, and he smoothed my hands off. I told you that makes me nervous. I told you I'm the instructor pilot. Now I realize this is just what many people call a bottle cap colonel talking to an eagle, but still, in this position, I'm the instructor pilot on board the airplane. So now it wasn't even subtle. I said, my hand will guard the throttle, sir. And that went okay, but he didn't ask to fly with me anymore, which is fine with me. Well, then a little later on, I'm in the wing headquarters, and he's coming out of the command post in kind of a hustle, and he says, Ray, you're a bomber instructor. We've got an aircraft emergency. Come with me. Or he says, do you have time to come with me? I said, sir, my time's yours. You know, if we have an aircraft emergency, that trumps whatever's going on. So we go out to his staff car, and he gets in the driver's seat. And we start out, and I noticed that the installed command radio is on the wrong frequency. I'm in the right seat, so I reach down to start to put the right frequency in. And he goes, I'll take care of that. Oh, he's driving the car. I'll take care of that. Yes, sir. Well, the brick goes off. The brick, before cell phones and all, and the command brick goes off. He's driving and trying to tune in the frequency. So I go to pick up the brick. I know how to top out a brick. And I pick it up, and he says, I will handle that. That's mine. So now he's got the car and the brick, and we're still on the wrong frequency. So I try once again to put in the right frequency. And he turned to me and said, I told you I will handle that. So at this point, I did probably what I shouldn't have done, but in the right seat of the car, to make a point, as I was sitting there, yes, sir. And I just sat, because I could tell that he was going to show me that he had a handle on it. Other staff cars pulled up, and they're like, you know, they're saying, get on the radio. I want to tell him, I can't. He won't let me touch it. Okay? As far as I'm concerned, very poor usage of the 4 attributes that gives a leader power. It was just not the way to handle that. At a minimum, if I had been in the reverse position and I had the junior officer, I'd say, you drive, I'll handle the radio. Perfect, I know how to drive a car. And that would give him the opportunity to talk and be all that, but I was not allowed to do that throughout. 2 more items. In my position as the ops officer of the squadron, I kind of owned all of the students throughout, from all of the ranks, all of the levels, airman basic to fellow lieutenant colonels. So when they got into trouble, if the section chief couldn't handle it, then they had to come see the colonel. Okay, and so 2 examples that I'll share with you that were actually kind of humorous. One, a young lady was overweight, And at that time, the Strategic Air Command was really big on making sure you met the weight and balance for your age and height and weight and so forth. And she was overweight. I would never in my office, the office that I had, have a female that I'm going to critique or whatever without a female witness. So I had, if you can, a favorite captain that knew me well. I said, all right, I need you down here in the office again. She'd come sit on the couch. Well, the lady came in, report in, and after she went through the report in, I said, please acknowledge the presence of, Captain Witness. I don't know what her name is now. And they would turn and acknowledge. And then I'd go through the critique, whatever, you gotta lose weight. You gotta be careful even in today's world, a guy talking to a girl telling her to lose weight. Sorry, young lady, but you're fat. It looked terrible or flight. It was out of weight. And then before they left, acknowledge the presence of Captain Witness, and then they'd go. Well, the next one, the tanker nav branch chief came to me and said, Colonel, I really need your help. You're going to talk to this lieutenant. I said, what's with the lieutenant? Well, she must have washed her blouse 100 times to make it thin, and she's not wearing a bra. I said, well, tell her to fix that. I can't, Colonel. You're crying out loud. So I called Captain Witness in again, and the lieutenant came in. She did look really nice, I have to admit, but not according. And so I had copied a section out of Airforce Reg 3510, which is the dress and personal appearance reg. I had underlined several portions, and after she reported in and all this, I said, would you please read the portion that I have highlighted here? And so she read it, and it included all the things that you're supposed to wear, including a bra and underwear and so forth. Are you in compliance with that part of the regulation? No, sir. Get in compliance and stay in compliance with that part of the regulation. And I had her salute, acknowledge the presence of Captain Witness. And as she walked down, I noticed that the other female captain was sitting there with her hand like this. And I said, what's the matter with you? She came up just cracking up, laughing. She said, how did you ever come up with that? I said, get out of my office. All right, another get out of my office on the other side of it. The worst chewing out I've ever gotten was from a fellow lieutenant colonel. I'm a pinned on lieutenant colonel. He's a lieutenant. Turned out he was a colonel selectee, which still makes him a lieutenant colonel. All right, and we were on a bomber mission, and we had hung ordnance. Hung ordnance means that not everything came out that was supposed to come out. And we had a flare drop. And the flares are actually in the tail portion here. And there's, I think, something like 72 very high temperature flares that if we're being attacked by fighters, you drop the flares so they'll go after the heat of the flare and not the heat of my motors. And so every so often you have to go through all the ordnance, the guns and the flares and everything to make sure they work. So we had a flare drop in one of the restricted areas, but could tell by the defense, not all of the flares came out. So now we've got a situation that we've got to return with hung ordnance. Well, the 93rd Bomb Wing reg on hung ordnance, I'm reading through that. Oh, there's a 15th Air Force supplement to it. I read through that. Well, this doesn't agree with that. Oh, and there's a SAC supplement to the 15th Air Force supplement. I read it, and it didn't agree with them either. So no matter what I was going to do, I was going to violate the other two. So I chose one that I thought made the most sense and came back in. The next day I got called into the colonel's office and man, this is a little odd, So I got a little chewing out. And finally when he was all done, he said, what do you got to say for yourself? Well, sir, we read the 93rd Bomb Wing reg, and then we noticed there was a 15th Air Force supplement to it, and there was a SAC supplement to that, and neither one of them agreed with what it was. So I chose the one that made the most sense, which happened to be 15th Air Force reg, and that's what we followed to the T as I came back in. And he looked at me and said, get out of my office. Different technique of get out of my office. Basically what that told me at the end, that he lacked a little bit of charisma there. Again, if I would have been in that position and someone had done that, all right, tell me what you were thinking on why you decided to do what you did. And the conversation would have probably ended as soon as they were done. But they jumped on it the other direction. So flying the B-52, just physically flying it, is a pain. It's heavy. It's old. The cables, there's hundreds of feet of cable just to adjust the engine, you know, and everything. And a lot of people complain about the wrinkles, you know, because if you see pictures, the bomber's got wrinkles all over it. But that's not because it's old. It's kind of like your elbow. You know, if you didn't have wrinkles on your elbow, every time you moved, you could tear the skin. Well, this thing turns and twists and bends, and from the cockpit, you can look out and see the engines and all, and you can take the control wheel and go like this, and the engines would bounce. I mean, I've seen fighters hold a better formation than these 8 engines. And so just flying it is a challenge. Flying with non-pilots, because the pilots want to fly, the rest of them have a job to do that they'd just as soon do in an air-conditioned office, okay, in many cases. So trying to lead that mixture in there was always a challenge, to one, be as aggressive as necessary. We got to get the job done. As nice as we can be. Oh, forgot one more story about flying in the B-52. I hope we got time for one more story. All right, so I'm a crew at the time. I'm a captain. My co-pilot's is a first lieutenant, the radar's a captain, the navigator's a lieutenant, and the EW is a lieutenant. So there's 2 captains, very young, rank-wise crew. Luckily, though, we had no smoking crew. None of the members on the crew smoked at all. And again, like someone getting out of the seat to go down for relief, if you were going to smoke a cigarette, you were to advise the pilot that you were, quote, bleeding down for a smoke was the term. And what you'd do is you'd turn your oxygen system off and then suck on the mask and the hose until you got all of the oxygen out of that, because if you lit a cigarette right there, I mean, it's pure oxygen in many cases. So they would bleed down for the smoke. So we're flying along, and I'm getting a staff eval from a colonel. And we're flying along, and all of a sudden, I smell smoke. Crew, pilot, I smell smoke. Everyone on oxygen. Everyone goes on oxygen, and I'm at a rig, pour it in. In my crew, we just did it, offense, defense, pilots, rather than going through the whole individual crew member order. It was just offense, defense, pilots. And then I'd EW, come off oxygen and see if you can find any smoke or flames or whatever. He was my bodyguard, so he'd come off oxygen and look around. He didn't find anything. All right, crew, cleared back on off oxygen, report if you smell anything. 15, 20 minutes later, crew, I smell smoke. Go on oxygen. We went on. The 3rd time I did that, the colonel, who was now putting out the same cigarette for the 3rd time, and he was lighting them with wooden matches, which has that strong sulfur smell. So off of intercom, he reaches up, hits me on the shoulder, and says, "You trying to give me a bad time for smoking, Captain?" "Sir, you didn't tell me you were bleeding down for a smoke." And he goes, "You're right. You're right. Enough said." So from then on, what he'd do off interphone, he'd just reach up, tap you on the shoulder with a cigarette in his hand. I'd give him a thumbs up, and I didn't put the crew off onto oxygen every time. And that worked very well, and we thought that was pretty clever. And one of the first pilots, again, that recognized smoke that quickly, I said, "We don't have a smoking crew, and I don't like the smell of sulfur burning in the airplane." It worked out well. So I tried hard to lead, follow, or get out of the way. And I tried hard to earn and develop as many of the position, the ability to punish and reward, expertise in the field, and develop whatever charisma I could to be a leader in the B-52. And it did work pretty well. So, can I answer questions about either the B-52? Yeah.
How many hours in the B-52?
I've got 2,600 hours, a little more, and which Boeing gives away a little pin. You cannot buy it, whatever. There's a 2,000 hour pin, a 5,000 hour pin, and a 10,000 hour pin. And before I quit flying it the first time around, I made sure I had at least 2,000 hours so that I could get my 2,000 hour Boeing pin. And then when I came back into it the next time, I got another 600 hours in. So 2,600 hours flying the B-52.
Your POH, huh, on a B-52.
Oh, I should have brought that.
Yeah, you showed it to me one time.
It comes in a briefcase. I mean, it's this wide, a briefcase. The performance manual is this thick, you know. So it's very, very thick. There is no doubt. And I spent a lot of time reading it. I tried to know it as well as I could, especially after I made instructor in it. A little bit of credibility. And you don't like having to keep saying, I don't know, but I'll look it up. You know, eventually you want to know where it is and know the answer to it.
Are they still flying the airplane?
As a matter of fact, B-52s are still alive. Only the H model, this happens to be a G model. The engines were different, a little bit of avionics, but and they're finally going to re-engine them. They're going to put new engines, and they're going with 8 engines. A lot of people have asked me too, why with now the technology, why don't they just put 4 big ones on it? And the real answer is it's plumbed, it's designed for 8. And to have to redo all of the systems to make it work 4, it's easier to put 8 back on it. The odd ones had generators. There were hydraulics in 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I flew the G model most of the time, which was the water injected for takeoff, and the even numbered ones had water injections, the odd ones didn't. So you had to know a lot of, it's just easier to put 8 back on than 4. But they're still flying them. It's still out there. It's amazing. It's going to be, by the time they retire it, it's going to be over 100-year-old bomber.
Wow.
An amazing airplane.
Are they flying them all over, or were they flying them?
The structure, the force structure has changed drastically. We used to have SAC and TAC as our 2 main fighting commands, where TAC was the tactical air command of the fighters, and SAC was the strategic air command of the bombers and worldwide air refueling. Okay? Some of the problems that existed with that kind of environment of SAC owning air refueling and bombing, and TAC owning the fighters and so forth. The fighter commander says, we've got this thing we're going to do, and we're going to need tanker support. Well, again, it's hard to go wing commander to wing commander. No, you got to go from wing commander to the 15th and 12th Air Force, then up to SAC and coordinate. So for the fighter wing commander to get tanker support, had to go all the way up to TAC, over to SAC, down to the wing, and back that way. Okay, very awkward. Now we have Air Combat Command, which combines all bombers, tankers, fighters, everything. So now a wing commander might very well have 5 bombers, 6 tankers, some F-15s, some A-10s, all, and you've got the whole arsenal at your disposal rather than only having one. In the past, it was like, all right, you're in charge of bullets, and you're in charge of guns, and you're in charge of magazines. Figure that one out. So now one person's got the guns, the magazines, and the bullets all together, which is a great, great change. Glad to see it.
So I was curious, you gave the elements of leadership. I forgot, did you say you were trained that, or is that something you developed?
I don't remember whether that was a book that I got those 4 out of, or combined of the books that I've gotten them out of. Because I've tried to study leadership, also like Wally said he's been reading some. Throughout Air Force officers, do we have more? I know, Alan, do we have any other Air Force officers among us? Okay. Then, if you remember, probably most of us went through Squadron Officer School, first just ROTC, and then Squadron Officer School. Squadron Officer School was at Montgomery, at Maxwell Air Force Base, Montgomery, Alabama. And it was about a 2.5, 3 month school, mainly all captains for the squadron officer. And it was a school of leadership. And there were a lot of different tasks, of some academics, some speaking, doing this. And one of the interesting ones was Project X. And you didn't know till you got there what it was all about. Some of the type of exercises they would do in Project X is your particular section, let's say there's 8 guys and there are 8 people, and so you're all given a card, like, all right, this one's yours, this card's yours, this card's yours, and the card said, "You're one of the workers, not the leader." Well, it turns out on this particular exercise, everybody's card said, "You're one of the workers, not the leader." And we had a job to do. And the leader would show up. Like, we've got things to do, whether I'm a leader or not, we've got things to do. All right? That was that little bit of charisma of the person that could do that. All right, one of the other exercises, we had to do a certain thing. You're the leader of the group. You're the leader of the group. You're the leader of the group. And so it offered another exercise of leadership and getting something done. Beyond that was Air Command and Staff College, which was mainly for majors of the lieutenant colonel era. And Alan, you probably even went on to Air War College, didn't you? Okay, which is another type of leadership. So throughout the military, there is a lot of leadership training. I did study it, and I was also a junior ROTC instructor and taught that. So those were the four that I've found that combine most of those leadership aspects. Position, ability to punish and reward, expertise in the field, and charisma. Those four. And the more of those you have, the better you are. Gentlemen, lady, thank you very much. I enjoyed
Ray.
sharing that.
Appreciate Ray so much. We just have one more thing on the agenda, and that's Joe May with our BMC.